Imagine your fingers tracing the seam between two stones, each weighing over 100 tons. They rise before you, colossal, impossibly angled, yet they fit together with such perfection that not even a blade of grass could slip between them. You are standing at Sacsayhuaman, high above Cusco, Peru, and something about this place defies the story we've been told. Now, travel with me, 8,000 miles across the world, to a hill in ancient Anatolia. There stand the T-shaped pillars of Göbekli Tepe, carved 12,000 years ago, long before the pyramids, long before writing. A temple that should not exist, and yet it does. What connects these places, separated by oceans and millennia? What if the answer is not different cultures finding the same idea, but something simpler and far more profound? What if they are signatures, left by the same forgotten hand? To trace a map that stretches beyond recorded history, we must first quiet the modern world. Let the night settle. Feel the weight of time press gently against your chest. And come with me as we hunt for the echoes of a lost civilization. The stones are silent, but their silence is vast. From the mountains of Peru to the plains of Anatolia, they rise like frozen thunder, immovable and ancient, speaking in a language carved from the bones of the earth itself. Each one seems to whisper a fragment of a forgotten sentence, a geometry too consistent to be random, a precision too perfect to be dismissed. And yet, according to every map, every carbon date, every confident plaque in every museum, these monuments are not connected. They cannot be connected. Because the obstacle is not belief, it is chronology. Time itself divides them. Göbekli Tepe, in modern-day Turkey, is dated to around 9,500 BC, 12,000 years ago. At that time, humanity was supposedly emerging from the last ice age. There were no cities, no writing, no agriculture. According to the timeline, civilization did not yet exist. But the site tells another story. Towering T-shaped pillars, carved with animals, aligned to the heavens, assembled with a skill that seems to come from nowhere. It appears at the beginning of our story, but looks as though it belongs to the middle or even the end. Fast forward across 10,000 years and half the world, the Andean highlands of Peru. Here stands Sacsayhuaman, its walls rising in cyclopean patterns, stones that weigh more than 100 tons each, stacked in perfect, interlocking harmony. No mortar, no gaps, just the raw intelligence of geometry and touch. Archaeology tells us these stones were shaped by the Inca around the 1400s AD. That's 11.5 millennia after Göbekli Tepe. Two sites, two continents, two civilizations. The distance between them is so great that to suggest any connection feels almost absurd. Oceans of time, oceans of water, no ships, no writing, no communication. And yet, the stones feel related. The way they fit, the way they speak to the sky, the way they refuse to erode, as though they were built to survive not just generations, but epochs. Mainstream archaeology, cautious and correct, warns us that these similarities do not imply contact. Human beings everywhere have always faced the same forces: gravity, light, night, the slow rhythm of the stars. From those shared experiences, similar ideas may naturally emerge: stone temples, solar alignments, circular enclosures. These are coincidences of cognition, says the scientific voice. Independent inventions born from shared human curiosity. And yet the skeptic's comfort falters under closer inspection. Because what we see across these sites is not merely a repetition of form, but of philosophy, a specific, intentional, and mathematically conscious relationship between earth and sky. They are not random alignments. They are celestial instruments. To even imagine that a single architectural intelligence could echo through 12,000 years of history, across continents, languages, and extinctions, feels impossible. And yet, impossibility has never stopped curiosity. So let's imagine it carefully. Suppose that long before recorded civilization, a culture, or perhaps a network of cultures, achieved a level of coordination and knowledge we have yet to rediscover. Not necessarily with machines, or metal, or cities of glass, but with vision, with time, with a sense of permanence that modern civilization, in all its speed, has lost. Such a people might have seen the world as one continuous landscape, coastlines shifting like breathing creatures, rivers as arteries of a single planetary body. They would have built not for comfort, but for continuity. Stone would have been their archive. And if they knew that cataclysm was coming, if they remembered the cycles of destruction and rebirth that govern the earth, they might have left behind a message that could outlast fire, flood, and forgetting itself. Not a written message, but a pattern. A blueprint in the language of geometry, astronomy, and scale. A story told in stone, visible from any era that could still look up and wonder. This is the immense obstacle we face. To explore this theory is to stand between two worlds, the rigor of science and the echo of something deeper. One world insists on proof, on data, on context, and it should. The other world whispers of memory older than evidence, intuition older than language. Between them lies a bridge of stone. The paradox is this: archaeology is built on what survives. But what if the greatest parts of the past did not survive? What if the surface of our history is merely the last few millimeters of a story that once stretched miles deep? Before we can hunt for that lost layer, the layer that might connect these monuments, we must first learn to see the barriers that blind us. Geography, vast and relentless. Chronology, fragmented and uncertain. And perhaps the most impenetrable barrier of all, the comfort of our own certainty. Because the human mind does not easily allow its own timeline to fracture. To accept that civilization may have existed long before the Sumerians or the Egyptians is not just a scientific question, it is a psychological one. It asks us to step outside the frame of everything we've been taught about progress, about what ancient really means, about who we are. And so, as we move deeper into this mystery, remember, the obstacle is not the stone. The obstacle is time itself. To follow the trail of these stones, we must first accept how small our modern map truly is. What we call the world today, with its fixed continents, its tidy borders, its convenient projections, is only a snapshot, a momentary pause in a planet that never stops moving. 12,000 years ago, the Earth looked very different. Sea levels were more than 100 meters lower. The coastlines we know did not yet exist. The Sunda Shelf, which now lies beneath the waters of Indonesia, was once a vast subcontinent, a bridge connecting Southeast Asia to Australia. The British Isles were still connected to Europe by a landmass called Doggerland, and much of the Caribbean was dry ground. If a civilization had flourished in that forgotten world, a maritime people who lived along those now drowned coasts, evidence of their existence would be buried under hundreds of feet of ocean and sediment. We would be looking for ghosts beneath the waves. Modern archaeology, however, has only just begun to explore these submerged landscapes. The ocean floor hides far more than shipwrecks. It hides the lost shorelines where early humanity may have built, traded, and worshipped. Sites like Yonaguni, off the coast of Japan, hint at the possibility. Its massive stepped formations appear almost architectural, terraces and corridors cut into the bedrock. Some say it's natural erosion. Others see the outline of a city swallowed by rising seas. The debate itself is telling. Our imagination strains against the boundaries of what we are willing to believe. Geography, then, is not just a physical obstacle. It is an epistemological one. Our evidence is biased toward what is visible and accessible. The rest, the majority of the ancient world, lies hidden beneath waves, jungle, or desert sand. Even the great monuments we know maybe only fragments of something far larger. At Giza, the pyramids rise above ground, but the surrounding plateau hides tunnels, chambers, and unfinished shafts descending deep into the bedrock. At Teotihuacan in Mexico, LiDAR scans have revealed entire districts buried under centuries of soil and volcanic ash. And in the Peruvian Andes, every new excavation reveals foundations older than the Inca, and beneath those, something older still. Archaeology, it seems, is always peeling back layers of its own surprise. Yet even when the earth reveals her secrets, time conspires to erase the connections between them. The chronology of human history, the very timeline we rely on, is built upon a series of radiocarbon measurements, stratigraphic layers, and cautious interpretations. These methods are extraordinarily precise within certain windows, but they blur as we push further into the deep past. Beyond 10,000 years, certainty fades into fog. The calibration curves widen. The margins of error stretch centuries, sometimes millennia. And in that uncertainty, possibilities multiply. What we call the birth of civilization, the Neolithic Revolution, may not have been a beginning at all, but a reawakening after catastrophe. A second dawn, not the first. This is where the obstacle of time becomes almost philosophical. Our species measures itself in linear progression, from primitive to advanced, from chaos to order. But the Earth does not move in lines. It breathes in cycles. Ice ages come and go. Oceans rise and fall. A single volcanic eruption, a comet impact, a shift in climate lasting just a few centuries. Any of these can erase cities, languages, entire ways of life. And when the survivors rebuild, they do so on the ruins of what came before, carrying fragments of memory that eventually harden into myth. The gods taught us to build. The gods gave us agriculture. The gods aligned the stones to the stars. Perhaps those gods were simply the last bearers of an older knowledge, the remnants of a civilization whose world had ended. But to science, this remains speculation, and rightly so. Evidence must be testable. Stories must be anchored in material fact. The tension between myth and measurement is the crucible of discovery. And yet, we must admit, much of what we now accept as historical truth once began as heresy. The idea that continents drift, that the earth orbits the sun, that meteorites fall from the sky, all were once impossible until they weren't. So perhaps the notion of a prehistoric global civilization deserves not blind belief, but honest curiosity. A question left open, not answered, but allowed to breathe. Geography and time, these are the twin sentinels guarding the gates of deep history. Together, they have erased more than they've preserved. But between them, the stones remain. They are the stubborn memory of the planet itself, impossible to carbon date, impervious to flood or flame. They do not tell us who or when or how. They only insist that someone knew. Someone understood the language of balance and symmetry. Someone saw the connection between the heavens and the earth, and inscribed that understanding into rock, as if to say, when all else is forgotten, remember this. And so, the obstacle stands before us, but it also invites us. For every mystery dismissed, there is a whisper that endures. The stones have waited. The question has waited. And we, latecomers to our own story, are only now beginning to listen. Perhaps the greatest obstacle of all is not distance, nor erosion, nor the silent drift of continents, but memory itself. Human memory is fragile, collective memory even more so. Empires rise not just from conquest, but from the stories they choose to preserve, and those they allow to vanish. When libraries burn, when languages die, when songs are no longer sung, entire worlds of knowledge collapse into dust. What survives are fragments, a pattern carved into a stone, a myth retold in whispers, an alignment of temples pointing toward a forgotten star. Archaeology, at its heart, is an act of remembering, but it remembers imperfectly. Every discovery is filtered through what we already believe to be possible. A scholar finds a structure that does not fit the known timeline. The dating is challenged, the data retested, the anomaly quietly set aside. We call this scientific caution, but sometimes it is simply the fear of rewriting the story. The deeper we dig, the more the earth seems to resist our categories. What we call primitive reveals geometry more precise than our machines. What we call myth aligns with celestial events measured in fractions of degrees. Consider this. The megalithic walls of Peru are built on a bedrock that has survived multiple seismic eras. The stones were shaped with a technique that seems to anticipate earthquake behavior, interlocking, self-supporting, flexible. Thousands of miles away, in the ruins of ancient Japan, a similar principle emerges in the buried foundations of prehistoric tombs. No connection, we are told. Pure coincidence. Yet coincidence, when multiplied across continents and epochs, begins to whisper another language, one we have not yet learned to read. Modern humanity inherited a broken timeline. We see ourselves as the culmination of progress, as if civilization were a single flame passed forward, unbroken. But the evidence suggests otherwise. There have been many flames, many beginnings, many nights when the fire was lost and reignited somewhere else. Between these lights and shadows lie thousands of years we cannot account for, a dark ocean of time. Within it, perhaps, lived a people who understood the stars as architecture, who mapped the earth by the pulse of magnetic lines, who left their knowledge not in paper or symbols, but in stone. And maybe that's why it endures. So the obstacle, the true barrier, is not the distance between continents, but the distance between our minds and theirs. We measure the past with carbon and stratigraphy. They may have measured it in the slow breathing of the planet itself. And until we learn to listen to that rhythm again, the one hidden beneath our cities, beneath our noise, the lost world will remain exactly that, lost. But something is changing. In the last decade, technology has turned against its own skepticism. Satellite imaging now reveals geometric traces beneath jungles, deserts, and ocean floors. LiDAR, sonar, and magnetometry, the new eyes of science, are exposing what erosion tried to hide. Entire networks of roads, canals, terraces, and alignments, too vast and too deliberate to be accidents of nature. And as each pattern emerges, the old maps begin to fail. So where does that leave us? On one side, a story of evolution, slow and logical, from caves to cities. On the other, an unsettling suspicion that we are missing an entire chapter, one erased not by ignorance, but by catastrophe. The continents, once closer, were ripped apart. The oceans swallowed coastlines. Ice turned to flood, and memory turned to myth. And in the silence that followed, a few survivors may have carried fragments of knowledge, seeds that would later sprout in Egypt, in Mesopotamia, in the Andes. Different flowers, same roots. We call them coincidences, but maybe they are coordinates. The world before history may not have been lost at all. It may simply be buried under layers of disbelief. And to reach it, we must do something radical. We must begin to imagine again. The silence deepens as the stars rise. You can almost feel the hum of the earth itself, that subtle vibration, like something enormous and ancient just beneath the surface, waiting to be seen again. When we left the noise of modern time behind, we stepped into a world without maps. And in that stillness, one question began to echo louder than all others. If the same forgotten hand shaped these stones, what would its signature look like? That is where the search truly begins. Not in dust or artifacts, but in patterns. Not in a single tool or object, but in the ghost of an idea. We are not looking for bones. We are looking for blueprints. A civilization, if it truly spanned oceans and epochs, would have left behind something more enduring than metal or parchment. It would have left intention, design, a logic so consistent that it transcended language itself. Every civilization decorates, but only one that remembers seeks to align, to measure, to echo the heavens. So we begin the forensic hunt for those echoes, the repeating geometries, the same engineering obsessions, the mirrored myths, the traces that whisper, "We were here before." At first, the patterns are subtle. A curve on one continent seems to mimic an angle on another, a way of shaping stone, of cutting corners not straight but beveled, appears again and again, from Peru to Japan, from Egypt to Easter Island. The deeper you look, the more familiar the impossible begins to feel. Some call it coincidence. But coincidence, repeated across millennia, becomes a fingerprint. The stones begin to speak in a language of proportion. Ratios recur. Angles repeat. Certain constants, the golden section, the 3, 4, 5 triangle, the precise ratio of 1, square root 2, emerge again and again in structures that should have no connection. How does a temple in Turkey, built 12,000 years ago, share the same geometric rhythm as one in the Andes? How does a circle of standing stones in Britain seem to encode the same celestial alignments as a desert monument in Egypt? It's as if every site is a verse in the same forgotten poem. The rational mind resists it. It tells us that cultures naturally find the same answers to similar problems. And that is true, up to a point. But these are not mere solutions. They are signatures. They are choices so specific, so unnecessary from a purely practical standpoint, that they begin to suggest something more: intention, repetition, memory. When you see a polygonal wall in Cusco, stones interlocking like liquid geometry, and then see the same technique mirrored in faraway Japan, you begin to ask, who taught the world to build this way? When ancient masons in the Andes create earthquake-proof walls by shaping stones into organic, puzzle-like fits, and masons in the Mediterranean do the same, was it invention or inheritance? It is easy to dismiss the possibility of inheritance because our timeline forbids it. But perhaps it is not the timeline that is wrong. It is our assumption that time moves in one direction. Maybe knowledge itself moves in cycles, resurfacing after each collapse, carried not by empires, but by survivors, wanderers, teachers, bearers of memory. And if so, their true legacy would not be empires or kings, but patterns, repeated ideas etched into the earth itself. Look closely at the oldest sites, not the grand ones built by known civilizations, but the mysterious foundations beneath them. At Baalbek in Lebanon, beneath Roman ruins, lies a platform of stones, so vast the Romans themselves could not have moved them. At Cusco, beneath Inca walls, lie foundations the Incas said were already there when they arrived. In Egypt, beneath the sand, older layers whisper of forgotten architects who shaped the bedrock before the pharaohs ever ruled. Always beneath the known, there is the unknown. And the unknown speaks the same language of scale, geometry, and impossible craftsmanship. If this is coincidence, then coincidence itself is divine. Each new site becomes a verse in an unfinished story, one that refuses to align with our linear view of time. Maybe civilization did not begin once in one place. Maybe it began many times, and what we call the beginning is merely the latest dawn. Our ancestors were not ignorant. They were observant. They looked to the stars, to the cycles of the sky, to the rhythm of the earth. And perhaps someone, long before history began, taught them to see those rhythms not as superstition, but as architecture. What if the world we've inherited is not the work of 1,000 separate cultures, but the scattered remains of one? A single civilization, shattered and reborn across ages, each time leaving fragments of its former glory, in stone, in myth, in stars. And now, with technology as our torch, we are beginning to rediscover what they left behind. Satellite imagery reveals geometric anomalies buried beneath jungles and deserts. Patterns too ordered to be natural. Underwater sonar finds what appear to be man-made terraces off the coasts of Japan, India, and Cuba, drowned under hundreds of feet of water since the last ice age. Each discovery stretches the map of human memory further back, until history itself starts to blur. Archaeology tells us that civilization began about 6,000 years ago, with writing, cities, kings. But the stones say otherwise. The stones remember a deeper time, when the Earth's climate shifted violently, when oceans rose, when the stars in the sky marked calendars now lost. To hear that older story, we must read between the lines of myth and geology, between fact and forgotten truth. We must look for what repeats, not just in material, but in message. Because the same phrase keeps appearing in the world's oldest myths. We were taught by the gods, and those gods always arrive after the flood. They always carry tools, knowledge, and a memory of a time before the world was broken. The Rakaka in the Andes, Awan-Nis in Mesopotamia, Quetzalcoatl in Mesoamerica, Thoth in Egypt. Different names, same story. They teach architecture, agriculture, astronomy, the three pillars of civilization. And when their work is done, they vanish, promising to return. Maybe they were not gods. Maybe they were what remained of something older, the last messengers of a world that had already fallen once. And so, their knowledge became myth. Their blueprints became ritual. Their story became our beginning. We are only now learning to see it again, the invisible thread that ties every monument, every myth, every sunrise alignment to the same ancient memory. Not proof, not certainty, but pattern. And pattern, when it defies coincidence, becomes a question that refuses to go away. That is where the forensic hunt begins, not in what we know, but in what keeps repeating when all else is forgotten. And so we follow it, across oceans, deserts, and mountains, in search of a single, unbroken signature carved into the bones of the earth. They called them Cyclopean, not because they were monstrous, but because they seemed inhuman. Walls made of stone so vast that to even imagine their movement defied reason. No pulleys, no cranes, no beasts of burden strong enough. Just a question left hanging in the dust. How? At Baalbek, in Lebanon, 3 stones each over 800 tons rest precisely aligned. Their seams so tight that a blade of air could not pass through. They lie beneath the Roman temple of Jupiter, but the Romans themselves admitted they did not build the platform below. It was there long before us, their own chronicler said, laid by the ancients. In the Peruvian highlands at Ollantaytambo, the same riddle waits in stone. 6 pink granite blocks, each weighing more than 50 tons, hauled from a quarry across a river valley, somehow raised and fitted perfectly upon one another at the edge of a mountain. The joints between them looked melted, as if the stone itself had been softened and shaped by unseen hands. Across the Mediterranean, in the ruins of Mycenae and Tiryns, the Greeks told the same story. It was built by the Cyclopes, they said, giants of the distant past. When a civilization meets something it cannot explain, it invents myth. But sometimes myth is just memory wearing another name. The choice to build with impossibly large stones makes no sense from an engineering perspective. Smaller blocks are easier, faster, safer. Yet time after time, the builders of these forgotten walls chose difficulty. They sought challenge. They declared to the world, "We command the impossible." And the stones obeyed. From Sacsayhuaman in Peru to the Assyrian at Abydos in Egypt, the same architectural instinct repeats. Stones that do not merely rest upon each other, but interlock. Surfaces not flat but curved, hugging one another as if alive. Corners bevel inward, absorbing seismic shock, defying both time and gravity. If these builders were separate cultures, separated by oceans and tens of thousands of years, then they all independently discovered the same aesthetic obsession: to make the earth itself look fluid. And that, perhaps, is the truest clue of all, because this was not mere architecture. It was ritual in stone, the movement of the unmovable, the taming of geology itself. To take the hardest matter known and command it into harmony, this was power both sacred and symbolic. It said, "We are not afraid of the mountain. We have become part of it." These were not palaces. They were not homes. They were statements. They exist to be seen, to endure, to whisper through centuries. We are greater than the limits of our time. The scale of these monuments served no functional purpose. They were too vast, too heavy, too deliberately inefficient. But if the purpose was spiritual, if the act of building was itself an offering, then it begins to make sense. It is the same paradox that modern engineers face when they touch these sites. The tools they know cannot explain the surfaces they see. The chisels leave marks too rough. The bronze or copper would have worn away before the first block was finished. And yet, each block was finished, perfectly. Some surfaces are polished to a mirror sheen. Some corners are laser straight, even though lasers did not exist. Drill holes found in Egypt's granite bedrock show spiral grooves, as if the drill bit cut through the stone with incredible speed and pressure, something only modern industrial tools could achieve. But the marks are ancient. The dust of their creation lies beneath layers of sediment thousands of years old. If you were to gather an engineer from NASA, a stonemason from Cusco, and a sculptor from Florence, and place them together before these ruins, they would agree on one thing. Whoever built them, they knew something we no longer do. And so we are left with the same riddle our ancestors faced. How? The myths offer their answers. The gods descended and taught the craft of stone. The shining ones, the watchers, the people of the serpent. Legends from every continent echo this theme. The teacher who came from afar, who showed humanity how to cut, lift, and place the bones of the earth. Perhaps the myth is not wrong, it is simply misunderstood. Because to move a 100-ton block, one does not merely need strength. One needs knowledge of balance, vibration, and resonance. The physics of sound and frequency are ancient sciences, long forgotten, yet the oldest temples of the world hum with acoustic perfection. At Stonehenge, at Malta's hypogeum, in the deep chambers of the Great Pyramid, voices amplify and resonate as if the walls themselves were tuned. In Cusco and Tiahuanaco, deep notes echo perfectly between stone corridors, vibrating through the chest like the low call of the earth itself. Coincidence or continuity? If these builders knew how to make stone sing, then perhaps they knew how to make it move. A civilization that understood vibration might have learned to lift not by force, but by frequency, by harmony. It sounds fantastical, but then, so did flight, until humanity rediscovered the physics of lift. There is no proof, only patterns. But those patterns point toward a philosophy, a worldview in which the physical and the spiritual were not divided, where moving a stone and moving a soul were the same act, both acts of resonance. To command stone, one must first command stillness. And in that stillness, perhaps, the ancients heard something we have forgotten, the hum of creation itself. Everywhere this pattern appears, a new truth emerges. These structures were not built for people. They were built to last beyond them. They were meant to speak to the future, to us. And maybe that is why they endure. Long after empires have crumbled and names have turned to dust, the stones remain silent, patient, unyielding. Because they were never monuments to the living. They were memorials to memory itself. If there was one unifying law among these mysterious builders, it was this: the greater the weight, the purer the message. So they built their messages in mountains. And across the ages, we have mistaken endurance for impossibility. But perhaps impossibility was always the point. Each block, each wall, each titanic platform an eternal echo, challenging every future age to remember that human hands, guided by an ancient will, once commanded the earth itself to rise. The sky was the first map. Long before borders or ink, our ancestors read the world in star patterns, in the slow procession of constellations, in the stubborn return of solstices and equinoxes. If stones are the memory of the earth, then the sky is its clock. And where the stones are placed with precise intent, the clock ticks in stone. Consider for a moment how a building becomes a calendar. A carefully oriented chamber receives sunlight only on a single day of the year. A narrow slit of shadow moves across a carved face, marking a festival. A line of standing stones aligns to the rising of a particular star. These are not accidents. They are acts of engineering that translate celestial motion into human time. They are instructions. When the light falls this way, plant. When the star rises here, celebrate. When the shadow reaches the threshold, remember. Stonehenge still hums with that ancient schedule. On the summer solstice, the sun climbs the heel stone and pours light into the circle, igniting a choreography written in stone and sky. Newgrange, older than Stonehenge, was built so that on the winter solstice, a narrow shaft channels sunlight into the inner chamber, illuminating carvings that might otherwise remain forever dark. These are precise moments, calculated and executed with an accuracy that implies patient observation across generations. But the phenomenon extends far beyond Western Europe. In Mesoamerica, the Great Pyramid at Chichen Itza performs its solar trick at each equinox. The late afternoon sun projects a shadow that undulates down the staircase, forming the shape of a serpent that seems to slither toward the earth. In Egypt, the shafts within the Great Pyramid appear to point toward stellar targets that meant something to their builders, Orion, Spelt, perhaps, or other bright stars tied to myths of death and rebirth. In the highlands of Peru, terraces and temples are arrayed to catch the solstice light, to observe the solstice sun and the zenith passage that was crucial to Andean agriculture. These alignments are not only energetic, they are mathematical acts. To orient a structure to a star that rises at a certain azimuth requires a knowledge of the local horizon, of seasonal declinations, of long cycles like precession. Precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis over 26,000 years, means that stellar positions change over millennia. To have oriented a temple to a star 10,000 years ago is to have recorded an observation of the heavens that must be corrected for precession to be understood now. That precision, that awareness of long cycles, reads like a signature. When we chart alignment after alignment across continents and cultures, a strange repetition emerges. Certain celestial markers recur. The solstices are universal, of course, but beyond that, we find repeated attention to particular stars and bands of the sky, the path of the Milky Way, the bright triangle of Orion, the cluster of the Pleiades. The Pleiades show up in myths everywhere. Sailors, farmers, and temple builders watch them as a seasonal indicator. Their rising and setting signaled planting seasons in Japan, festivals in Greece, and harvest times in Mesoamerica. The same celestial rhythm used different words, but sang the same song. Archaeoastronomy gives us tools to measure this conversation between stone and sky. We map azimuths and declinations. We calibrate for precession and for the slow tilt of continents. And when we do, the results often surprise the trained mind. Sites separated by oceans, with builders who never knew one another, sometimes aligned to the same stellar phenomena within a fraction of a degree. Coincidence becomes a smaller explanation with every precise measurement. The implications are unsettling. Either many cultures independently developed extraordinarily similar astronomical systems, or they inherited knowledge from a common source, a shared practice of celestial observation that had been encoded into their ceremonial architecture. To insist on independence requires us to accept the improbability that dozens of cultures, in isolation, would converge on not only the same astronomical targets, but also on constructing monuments that translate those targets into architectural events. There is also the language of ritual embedded in alignment. Light and shadow are dramatic. They transform a static monument into a living theater. A temple that reveals its inner sanctum only once a year creates an annual miracle, an event that anchors community memory and myth. Over centuries, that event hardens into liturgy. The builders did not merely record astronomical facts. They dramatized them, turning celestial mechanics into communal cosmology. When myths are read alongside alignments, patterns deepen. Stories of a returning star or a celestial hero align with temples oriented to that star. A culture's calendar, its festivals, its myths, and the very orientation of its sacred architecture often form a coherent system. These are integrated cosmologies, where the sky informs the built world and the built world instructs the living. Some sites, like Göbekli Tepe, push this problem even further back in time. The T-pillars there, decorated with animal motifs and arranged in circles, suggest astronomical intent, though precisely decoding it is still debated. If pre-Neolithic people were already aligning structures with the sky, then the history of celestial architecture is older than we assumed, and the gap between ancient observation and later temple building collapses. We must also consider the possibility that the same astronomical textbook was shared in fragments. Knowledge can travel even when populations scatter. Teachers, migrating survivors, or ritual specialists could carry sky maps across oceans in oral form, translating them into local stone. Thus, the same celestial targets persisted, but the syntax changed: local stone, local stories, same sky. There are, of course, methodological cautions. Alignment studies are vulnerable to selective sampling. Search long enough and patterns will appear by chance. The rigorous practitioner tests hypotheses by examining control samples, by using statistics, and by acknowledging the role of cultural context. Yet even with those cautionary measures, the repetition of specific celestial foci is difficult to explain away entirely. Beyond the solstices and the bright constellations lies something more subtle, an insistence on the monument as a timekeeper across eras. Many of these megalithic sites could have functioned as multi-generational observatories, allowing knowledge to be maintained and recalibrated across centuries. The stone does not forget the alignment. The sky changes slowly. The stone remains. In the intersection of stone and sky, the memory of a people can survive long after language has eroded. And that may be precisely what the builders intended. If a catastrophic event were possible, a deluge, an abrupt climate shift, a society might decide to encode its knowledge, or it could outlast fire and flood. The sky is relentless in its cycles. Align a stone to a star, and you have an external, reliable clock. Carve the rule into bedrock, and you have instruction and ritual in one stroke. So when we stand before these stones and trace their alignments, we are listening to an ancient metronome. The builders set their tempo. The world keeps time. Across oceans and time, similar tempos emerge. The question then is not merely who observed the stars, but who taught the observation, who formalized it into architecture, and why that knowledge echoed so persistently through the human story. If the same celestial grammar appears across continents, it becomes harder to imagine these acts as isolated inventions. Instead, they read like variations on a theme, a global song translated into stone by people separated by distance, but perhaps connected in memory. Whether that connection was direct transmission, survivorship bias, or a shared human impulse toward order, the net result is the same. The sky and the stone sing together, and their duet has been heard in every age. When you stand before the walls of Sacsayhuaman, your eyes tell you one thing, and your mind tells you another. Your eyes see stones colossal, irregular, fitted like a jigsaw designed by gods. But your mind, trained in the logic of tools and angles, refuses to believe they were placed by human hands. The seams between them are hair-thin, contoured, curved, as if the rock had once been soft clay, molded to perfection and then frozen in time. How, we ask, could a Bronze Age people without iron tools, without wheels, without beasts of burden have shaped and lifted these stones? The question echoes in every corridor of ancient architecture. Not disbelief in their intelligence, but awe at their methods. Because somewhere between the visible evidence and our technological expectations, something doesn't quite align. In Peru, the stones at Ollantaytambo rise like frozen waves of molten granite. Their surfaces bear signs not of chiseling, but of scooping, as if immense ladles had carved out the rock with impossible smoothness. Some call it weathering, others ancient tooling. And then there are the drill holes at Aswan, spiraling perfectly through granite, so hard that even modern diamond-tipped drills struggle to replicate them with that same speed and symmetry. At Puma Punku in Bolivia, blocks of andesite rest like scattered remnants of a lost geometry lesson. Each H-shaped block fits another with machine-like precision. Perfect 90-degree angles, smooth channels and right-angled recesses, as though shaped by an industrial mold. Yet these ruins predate the Inca by centuries. How could people, without iron or steel, carve volcanic rock with such finesse? The explanations vary. Some say experimentation, endless trial and error, generations honing technique. Others invoke lost tools, forgotten alloys, or methods of abrasion, using quartz sand and patience measured in centuries. And still others whisper of something stranger, a technology that softened stone itself. It sounds absurd until you notice how often the stone seems to flow. In Cusco, walls undulate, their blocks swelling and sinking into one another like cooled wax. In Egypt, the unfinished obelisk at Aswan shows curved edges, as if the granite had been peeled from its cradle, not hacked free. The possibility remote. Unsettling is that the ancients had found ways to manipulate the molecular structure of stone, or to use vibration and resonance to fracture and shape it. Modern experiments have tried to simulate this with ultrasound, heat, and chemicals. None fully explain what we see. The stones, in their silence, hold their secrets too well. Some researchers note the telltale polish that appears only when stone has been shaped by immense, rapid friction. Others point out the evidence of quarrying techniques that seem more advanced than the societies attributed to them. In Baalbek, Lebanon, the trilithon stones weigh over 800 tons each cut, moved and stacked with an accuracy that defies easy explanation. Even our largest cranes today would groan at the task. How did they lift them? Levers? Ramps? Perhaps, yet to move one such block would require a ramp longer than the structure itself, built and destroyed with every placement. And in many cases, the terrain would have made it physically impossible. If not brute force, then what? Legends from Egypt and South America both speak of sound of chants and tones that made the stones float. In the myth of Viracocha, the creator god teaches his followers to move stone as if it were a child. In Egyptian ritual texts, the spoken word the Heka is said to animate matter, to command the inanimate. To our rational minds, such stories are myth. Yet they persist in too many corners of the ancient world to ignore completely. What if these myths are coded descriptions of a real principle, a technology of vibration, resonance, or magnetism now lost to us? After all, the ancients understood resonance deeply. Their temples were tuned like instruments. In the hypogeum of Malta, a low human hum resonates through the chambers, vibrating bones and walls alike. In the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid, the air itself becomes a resonant cavity, amplifying sound into something visceral. These were not accidents. They reveal an intimacy with the physics of sound, of frequency, of how vibration shapes matter. Every stone, when struck, has its note. And if architecture itself was a symphony, perhaps these builders had learned to play geology like a string. Consider also the magnetic anomalies found at certain megalithic sites. Compasses behave erratically. Electromagnetic readings spike inexplicably. We measure these disturbances with instruments, but to ancient builders, Such phenomena would have been tactile, a feeling in the stone, a hum beneath the fingertips. Some modern researchers have suggested that stone, under certain stresses, releases subtle electric charges, a property known as piezoelectricity. Quartz, abundant in granite, responds to pressure by generating voltage. If ancient engineers knew how to manipulate that effect, even intuitively, they might have exploited it to aid in shaping or moving materials. We are left with fragments of evidence, machine-like precision without machines, engineering without explanation. The more we analyze, the more the problem deepens. And perhaps that is the point. Because the true genius of these builders may not lie in the specific method, but in the mindset that made such feats possible. They worked in complete harmony with the natural world, not in opposition to it. They observed, they listened, they experimented, and above all, they remembered. To us, they are enigmas people who somehow did what we, with all our science, cannot easily reproduce. But to them, perhaps it was simply knowledge. Not supernatural, not alien, but ancestral. There's a humility in that idea. A reminder that progress is not linear, that technology can vanish, that wisdom can erode like the inscriptions on a temple wall. When the stones whisper of lost tools and forgotten hands, they're not mocking us. They're re-inviting us to rediscover the dialogue between human intention and the raw materials of the earth. And so we return to the question that underlies every mystery in this story. If this was all just coincidence, if the precision, the repetition, the mastery across continents were merely parallel invention, then why does it feel so unified? The marks of the chisel change, but the philosophy of building remains the same. Massive blocks, perfect joins, indifference to time. Each site is a variation on the same idea, that permanence itself was the message. Perhaps they built for us. Perhaps the lost technique was never about how to move stone, but how to move meaning, how to ensure that across millennia, a fragment of their world would survive to speak to ours. And now, as we trace those scenes with our fingertips, perhaps we are not only studying them, perhaps we are answering. 12,800 years ago, the world shuddered. The ice that had been retreating for millennia paused, and advanced again. The climate convulsed. Temperatures plummeted, species vanished, forests burned, oceans shifted, and something in the rhythm of the earth broke. We call it the Younger Dryas, a name clinical enough to hide the violence it describes. But behind those two quiet words lies an event so abrupt, so catastrophic, that it nearly erased the trajectory of life as we know it. Something happened at the end of the last ice age. The earth had been warming gradually, glaciers melting, sea levels rising, ecosystems recovering. Then, almost overnight, everything reversed. Temperatures in the northern hemisphere dropped by as much as 10 degrees Celsius. The meltwater froze again. Megafauna, mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed cats disappeared within centuries. Human populations, once scattered and rising, dwindled. For over 1,000 years, the planet was plunged back into a deep freeze. And then, just as suddenly, it warmed again. The cause of that sudden cold snap has long been debated. But a growing body of evidence, geological, chemical, astronomical, whispers the same haunting story. Something came from the sky. Across multiple continents, in layers dated precisely to around 12,800 years ago, scientists have found a strange fingerprint. Microscopic spherules of molten glass. Nanodiamonds formed only under extreme pressure. Shards of iridium and platinum, metals rare on Earth, but common in cosmic debris. Charcoal, everywhere, a global layer of burning. The Younger Dryas boundary layer, as it's called, reads like a crime scene. The aftermath of impact. The comet hypothesis proposes that a fragmented comet, perhaps 2 or more kilometers wide, entered Earth's atmosphere and detonated in multiple airbursts over the ice sheets of North America and Northern Europe. The explosions would have released energy equivalent to thousands of Hiroshima bombs. Firestorms ignited across continents. The shockwaves would have sent tsunamis surging across inland seas. The debris, flung high into the stratosphere, would have dimmed sunlight, collapsing ecosystems and triggering a miniature ice age. It sounds like mythology, but the strata do not lie. Beneath the sediments of the black mat layer, mammoth bones end. Above it, a new world begins. Imagine standing there. You are part of a thriving culture at the close of the Pleistocene. You've known generations of stable seasons, rich lands, predictable skies. Then, one night, the sky catches fire. The horizon glows white. The ground trembles. A wave of heat rolls over forests, turning them to ash in moments. Rivers boil, herds stampede into the sea. The stars disappear behind a veil of smoke. The air itself becomes poison. When the light returns, the world you knew is gone. If an advanced civilization had existed then, not one of satellites and engines, but of stone, sea, and stars, this is how it would have ended. Not with conquest, but with silence. Cities, if they existed, would have burned, then drowned beneath meltwater floods. Knowledge would have vanished with its carriers. Only those who fled to high ground, who remembered by telling stories around fires, would have survived. And so we arrive at the heart of the question. What if there really was a before world? If, as many myths suggest, humanity's memory begins not with creation, but with recovery, then the Younger Dryas cataclysm provides both motive and mechanism. A near global reset. A geological punctuation mark between one age of man and another. For decades, mainstream archaeology dismissed this as fantasy. No evidence of such a lost civilization, they said. But the evidence for the cataclysm itself grows each year. In Greenland ice cores, spikes of platinum. In the Great Lakes region, layers of carbonized soil. In South America, burn marks precisely dated to the same interval. The planet records the trauma. And yet, right after this chaos, something else extraordinary happens. The sudden appearance of agriculture, monumental architecture, astronomy, and myth. Göbekli Tepe rises in Anatolia. Just centuries after the Younger Dryas, ends an architectural marvel from people who were supposed to still be hunter-gatherers. The first organized societies, the first sacred enclosures, appear in places once scoured by ice and flood. It is as if someone or something remembered. The survivors of a shattered world might have carried fragments of knowledge, star maps, calendars, stories encoded in myth. They might have built in stone to preserve what perished in clay. They might have taught, not as rulers, but as memory keepers. This is not fantasy. It's forensic imagination. The comet provides the crime. The geological layer provides the timeline. The sudden leap in human complexity provides the question. A cataclysm of this scale would not simply destroy, it would transform. The trauma of it would echo for generations, shaping mythologies of fire and flood, of gods descending and worlds reborn. It would teach reverence for the sky, fear of its wrath, and awe at its cycles. It would plant, deep within the human story, the notion that time is not endless progress, but fragile continuity, always one comet away from being rewritten. The earth remembers what we forget. It holds the scars. Beneath our feet lies a layer of ash and glass, the signature of a moment when the world ended and began again. And maybe, buried beneath those same layers, are traces of those who came before us, their monuments shattered, their knowledge dispersed, their sky maps etched into stone, not for themselves, but for whoever might someday look up and wonder. In every myth, there is a moment when the sky turns against the earth, fire descends, waters rise, the gods weep or rage. It is a scene so deeply carved into the human psyche that it appears in stories from every continent. We have taken it as metaphor, as moral allegory, but perhaps it is memory. The Younger Dryas cataclysm, if seen through the eyes of survivors, would have looked divine in its fury. To a people who mapped time by the heavens, a firestorm from the stars would not have been an accident of nature. It would have been a message. For those who lived through it, survival would have meant adaptation on an unimaginable scale. The air unbreathable, the land burning, the seasons destroyed. To live at all was an act of genius. Those who fled north or south, who learned to read the new sky, who remembered the patterns of stars through smoke, those are the ones who would have become the ancestors of later civilizations. They would have rebuilt the story of the world from fragments, carrying with them half-burned maps and half-remembered rituals. This is the bridge between geology and legend. The comet strike gives us the physical cause. The global myths give us the cultural effect. A civilization, once global or at least interconnected by shared knowledge, fractured into silence. Small groups endured in isolation. And as generations passed, the memory of the cataclysm transformed into story. Gods hurling thunder, floods cleansing the earth, divine punishment and renewal. But what if those gods were simply the survivors, the engineers, navigators, and astronomers of the before world, arriving among traumatized hunter-gatherers, teaching them how to read the stars, plant crops, track the sun, and build monuments aligned with the heavens? In the ruins of a global disaster, such teachers would seem divine. Their knowledge would be worshipped. Their memory would become immortal. We see traces of this everywhere. In the myths of Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl descends from the sky after a great flood, teaching men how to calculate time and build temples. In Andean stories, Viracocha emerges from the waters after darkness, bringing fire and law. In Egypt, Thoth and Osiris arrive as bringers of order after chaos. Across oceans, the same archetype repeats. A catastrophic event followed by culture bearers who rebuild the world. To call these coincidences is to underestimate both human memory and geological violence. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis does not merely explain a cold snap. It explains a wound, a trauma encoded not just in sediments, but in our collective imagination. Science, too, bears its scars of disbelief. When the hypothesis was first proposed, it was ridiculed, too dramatic, too apocalyptic. Yet year after year, new evidence accumulates. Platinum spikes in Greenland ice cores, microspherules in South American sediments, charcoal layers that cross hemispheres, burned mastodon tusks, melted glass found at altitudes and pressures no wildfire could create. Even the Carolina Bays, thousands of elliptical depressions across the eastern United States, may be relics of secondary impacts, scars of molten ice falling back to Earth. The pattern holds. The pieces fit. If this is true, then our species has already lived through one global reset, the first apocalypse. And the survivors, clinging to their memories, seeded the next cycle of civilization. That would make us not the first advanced society on Earth, but merely the latest iteration of a long repeating rhythm. One written in stone and starlight, interrupted by fire. Imagine that rhythm as a heartbeat. The pulse of human progress quickens, civilizations bloom, knowledge accumulates, and then, abruptly, the pulse stops. Centuries of silence. The next beat begins in ruins, among ashes, with memory disguised as myth. The cycle begins again. Perhaps this is why the megaliths matter so much. Perhaps they are not just remnants of ritual, but records of survival, markers of when the world last changed, and how. Perhaps the alignments to solstices, the engravings of stars, the obsession with time and cycles were not aesthetic choices, but warnings. The builders may have encoded their trauma into stone, hoping that someday, when the sky darkened again, someone would remember what had happened before. The Younger Dryas was not the end of the world, but the end of a world and the beginning of ours. It was the dividing line between myth and memory, between what humanity was and what it became. And when you stand on a cold morning, looking up at the same stars that those survivors saw through the haze of smoke and ash. The silence between those epochs feels thin. The same constellations, slightly shifted by precession, still turn overhead. The same cometary paths still cross our orbit. The same fragility still defines our place here. The comet that burned the Ice Age sky might have spared just enough to let us begin again. But it left a message, etched in every layer of earth and story. Nothing built by man is permanent, not even civilization itself. The stones remember. The sky repeats. And somewhere between them, in that narrow space of awe and terror, the truth of who we are waits, patient, silent, older than history, and watching. What remains after the flood is silence. A silence so vast, it feels like the earth is holding its breath. The survivors stand upon new shores, staring at a world they no longer recognize. The stars above are unchanged, but everything else has been rearranged. Rivers have shifted. Mountains have collapsed. The coastlines that once defined their maps have vanished beneath the endless blue. And yet, in that silence, there is still memory. Faint, fractured, like the last light fading through storm clouds. Imagine one of those survivors. He is barefoot, standing on a high ridge, staring at the sea that took everything. He carries nothing but a fragment of stone, a relic from the old world. He does not yet know that he is the ancestor of civilizations yet to come. To him, the flood is not myth. It is pain, carved into bone. But as he looks up at the stars, something stirs within him. A pattern. A memory of how the sky once guided the builders. He begins to draw in the sand, tracing lines between stars, between constellations and the horizon. It is not knowledge, not yet. It is the echo of knowledge, awakening again. This is how memory becomes myth, and myth becomes instruction. The flood was not only an ending, it was a transmission. Those who survived carried within them fragments of an older order, pieces of geometry, astronomy, and purpose. They became the seeds of the next age, and scattered across the continents, far from one another, those seeds began to sprout. When the first temples rose after the cataclysm, they were not acts of invention. They were acts of remembrance. Each culture, isolated by time and geography, began rebuilding the same patterns, the same shapes, the same alignments, the same reverence for the heavens. These were not coincidences. They were distant harmonics of a single ancient song. Göbekli Tepe rose in the hills of Anatolia, its T-shaped pillars facing the stars, carved with animals that may have once walked through a world before the flood. Thousands of miles away, on the plains of South America, other hands carved stones that interlocked with impossible precision. In Egypt, the builders aligned the pyramids to the belt of Orion, a celestial memory encoded in limestone. And across the globe, cultures began to speak of teachers, pale-skinned, bearded, or radiant beings who came from the sea after the flood to rebuild what was lost. The stories differ in language, but converge in rhythm. The gods always come from water. They always bring the stars. They always teach the balance between heaven and earth. It is almost as if these myths are describing not divinity, but transmission, an inheritance of knowledge carried by those who refuse to let the memory of the before world die. The flood myths, then, may not be warnings about morality at all. They may be memories of survival, encrypted blueprints of how to begin again. The builders of the next age did not start from nothing. They started from remembrance. Their monuments were not merely temples. They were devices for preserving time. Their alignments, their carvings, their proportions, all were ways of saying, we were here before. We remember what the sky once was. To the modern eye, these similarities look like coincidence. But to the ancient mind, they were continuity. Stone was not a choice of convenience. It was a necessity. Wood burns, clay dissolves, words are forgotten, but stone endures. It is the medium of eternity. That is why the survivors of the flood built with it. Each monolith, each pyramid, each cyclopean wall was not only a home for gods, but a form of data preservation, a way to speak across millennia. And so, in the quiet centuries after the deluge, humanity began again, not as a blank slate, but as a civilization haunted by memory. The myths became guides, the stars became teachers, and the stones became their testimony. But there is another layer to this story. Beneath the physical rebuilding lies something deeper, the emotional scar. The flood did not just reshape landscapes. It reshaped the human soul. Every myth that speaks of water also speaks of fear, of nature's power to erase us. That collective trauma became the foundation of religion, architecture, and science. We sought to measure the heavens because we feared what came from above. We built monuments to the sun because we feared the dark. The lost civilization may have passed on their knowledge, but the flood passed on its warning. And in that warning lies the most human truth of all. We build because we fear forgetting. Now, picture this. Centuries after the cataclysm, generations have passed. The flood has become legend. The legend has become ritual. The survivors' descendants build their temples in stone and orient them toward the stars that guided their ancestors. They do not know why they do it. They only know that they must. The shape of the cosmos is their inheritance, carried in myth and muscle memory. Each monument they raise is both a tribute and a question. Who built before us? And perhaps that question is the real message. Not the stones themselves, but the curiosity they ignite. Every myth, every temple, every alignment is a whisper from the past, urging us not to forget that we have been here before. When we look at the megaliths now, when we run our fingers across the impossible scenes of Saxe-Meissen, or stare up at the weightless geometry of Baalbek, we are not just studying stones. We are touching the afterimage of survival. These are not monuments to gods, but to continuity, a record of humanity's refusal to vanish. If you listen closely, beneath the science and the skepticism, you can hear what the stones are saying. They are not shouting. They are whispering, a rhythm of wind and silence, like breath caught between worlds. Remember. And that is where our journey finds its footing, not in certainty, but in wonder. Not in answers, but in echoes. If you have followed this far, if you have felt the pull of these forgotten patterns, the hum of ancient symmetry, the quiet question that will not go away, then you are already part of this search. This exploration is not about proving a theory. It is about remembering a story older than history itself. Some call it pseudoscience. Others call it mythology. But to those who listen with curiosity rather than judgment, it is something simpler, a mirror held up to our own reflection in time. Perhaps the flood myths survive because they were never just about water. They were about the fragility of knowledge, the resilience of memory, and the promise that even after the world ends, something endures. And that something is us. So let us continue, beyond the flood, beyond the silence, to imagine who the lost builders might have been and what their message still whispers through the stones. If this story resonates with you, if you felt the gravity of ancient mysteries calling beneath the surface of our modern world, then stay with me. Because what comes next is the most daring idea of all, not the destruction of a world, but its rebirth. Our search is only halfway through. The flood has receded, the stones remain, and somewhere within them, the architects of the forgotten age are still waiting for us to remember. Imagine a world where the boundaries of continents dissolve under a vision so vast it encompasses oceans, mountains, deserts, and forests. Picture a civilization that does not recognize political borders because its architects see the earth as a single living organism, its patterns, cycles, and energies interconnected. They are not builders of cities or kings' palaces. They are builders of memory itself. Every stone placed, every polygonal joint carved, every monument aligned with the sun, the moon, Or a distant star is a message written across time, a message intended for generations that do not yet exist, for eyes that will open thousands of years later. Close your eyes and imagine walking along the coastlines with these architects. Feel the spray of the sea on your face, the creak of wooden hulls as they navigate currents and tides guided not only by the wind, but by a deep understanding of the earth's rhythms. These are sages of the sea, masters of navigation and geometry, carrying knowledge in their bones as much as in their minds. They map the world in ways invisible to ordinary observation, translating landscapes into instructions, rivers into lines of communication, stars into calendars. Their voyages are long, patient, methodical, yet every journey carries a single purpose: to encode knowledge in forms that will survive fire, flood, and the inevitable erosion of memory. Every stone they set becomes part of a global conversation. The enormous H-blocks at Puma Punku are not mere constructions. They are mnemonic devices, communicating principles of weight, leverage, and geometry. The terraces of Ollantaytambo speak of both agriculture and ritual, encoding cycles of planting and harvest alongside cosmic events. In Lebanon, the trilithon stones of Baalbek proclaim mastery over not just material, but attention itself, a challenge to anyone who would follow. Observe, measure, learn, endure. These are not isolated statements. They are threads of the same fabric, woven across continents and millennia. And yet, imagine their awareness of impermanence. They knew that the earth is violent, that cataclysms are inevitable. They saw the rivers flood, the ice advance and retreat, the forests ignite, and the skies darken with cometary dust. They understood that empires rise and fall, that languages disappear, that memory itself is fragile. And so, they did not build for the present. They built for the far future, knowing that all ephemeral structures, palaces, settlements, even cities, might vanish, leaving only the stones that endure. They were not merely architects. They were archivists of the human experience, codifying wisdom into stone, sunlight, shadow, and alignment. Consider the precision required for such a task. To align a chamber to a solstice sunrise, to orient a terrace to the zenith sun, or to carve stone so perfectly that not even a blade of grass can fit between joints, demands patience, observation, and technique. Yet their ingenuity surpasses mere craftsmanship. It is as if they understood the earth as a living record, capable of preserving knowledge if approached with respect and insight. Every monument becomes a teacher, every alignment a lesson, every cut stone a syllable in a language of permanence. Their pedagogy is silent but eloquent, and it reaches us millennia later in the form of wonder and questions. Now imagine the transmission of this knowledge. Survivors of cataclysms carry fragments of what was known before, seeds of wisdom encoded in ritual, story, and craft. One group travels along rivers to the heart of a continent, another sails across oceans, another climbs high mountains. Each community adapts the knowledge to local conditions, local stone, local climate, local culture. But the signature persists. The blueprint survives. Cyclopean stones, celestial alignments, precise joinery, and polygonal construction echo across geography. They are not identical in form, yet they speak the same language, the same philosophy of continuity. These Sea People sages are conscious of the cycles of time. Their constructions are not meant for immediate recognition. They are designed to withstand the loss of memory, the erosion of history, and the fading of civilizations. In their design, they embed calendars, star charts, and rituals. Each act of construction, a bridge between what was and what might be. They encode survival strategies, not only for humans, but for culture itself, ensuring that knowledge about agriculture, astronomy, geometry, and human organization can be recovered even when the surrounding society is gone. Visualize the sensory impact of such sites. Approach a megalith, feel its weight, Sense the intention behind its placement. Watch the shadow creep along the floor on the solstice, and notice the sunlight illuminating a carved figure, a teaching, a mnemonic. Observe the curvature of stones at Puma Punku, the massive terraces at Alantay Tambo, and the T-pillars at Göbekli Tepe. Across all these sites, the same deliberate attention emerges, a message in scale, in orientation, in touch, in alignment. They are communicating across time, not just across space. Now imagine their worldview. They understand that the Earth itself is a teacher, that the cycles of sun and star are not abstractions but constants, and that permanence is achieved not through dominance, but through careful observation and embedding of knowledge. Their work is simultaneously practical and philosophical. Agricultural terraces follow the sun, astronomical alignments track the seasons, and monumental stones encode instructions and stories. Knowledge and art are inseparable. Utility and memory coexist in perfect balance. And finally, consider the ethical dimension of this civilization. They were not conquerors. They were stewards. Their ambition was not power, but legacy. They built for survival, for continuity, for the future, embedding guidance where it could endure when all else failed. Each site is a whisper to humanity. Observe, measure, endure, learn, remember. They teach patience, humility, and awareness of the forces greater than ourselves. They show that civilization is not measured by wealth or territory, but by foresight, understanding, and care for the generations that follow. Imagine standing before one of their monuments long after the world has changed. The sky is the same, the sun rises and sets as it always has, yet the civilization that once thrived, that once carved the stone with such deliberate care, is gone. Nothing remains of their cities, their knowledge of metallurgy or agriculture, perhaps not even their languages. Only the stones endure, silent but eloquent, marking the places where wisdom once walked among mortals. The paradox becomes palpable. How could a people so intelligent, so attuned to the rhythms of earth and sky, simply vanish? Perhaps their greatness was not in technology as we understand it. Perhaps it was in something far subtler, consciousness, vision, and the ability to plan across generations. They knew that empires could crumble, that tools could rust, that written words could fade, but the lessons encoded in stone, in alignment, in the choreography of shadow and light, were nearly indestructible. They built not for comfort, nor for domination, but for endurance, endurance of knowledge, of philosophy, of culture. Yet even this foresight had its limits. Imagine the magnitude of the cataclysm that struck at the end of the Younger Dryas, when cometary fragments, meteor showers, and climatic upheavals reshaped the world. Entire regions froze, rivers overflowed, forests burned. The planet itself became a force of annihilation. Even a civilization attuned to time and nature could not withstand a disruption of such scale. Cities, ships, tools, libraries, all could be lost in a single season. Only the stones, the most durable and carefully aligned monuments, remained. There is a profound humility in this reality. The survivors of such an event would have been few, scattered, and burdened with both grief and responsibility. Imagine the elders, holding the fragments of knowledge, the blueprints of a world before, traveling across continents. Their mission, to ensure that humanity could begin again, that civilization could rise from ashes and ice, and that the essential truths of astronomy, mathematics, and human organization could survive the millennia. In this context, the myths of culture-bearer gods, from Quetzalcoatl to Viracocha, from Gilgamesh to Deucalion, take on a new significance. They are not fantasy. They are memories of survival, of the guardians of knowledge walking among the emerging peoples of the post-cataclysmic world. Consider the psychological burden of such knowledge. To carry wisdom from a lost age is both a privilege and a torment. You know what was possible, and yet the world around you is unprepared, primitive, vulnerable. You see the patterns of stars, the cycles of Earth, and you understand the principles that could elevate a society, yet you must teach slowly, subtly, in forms that local cultures can adopt and remember. Every gesture, every story, every stone you place is a calibration between what was lost and what must be preserved. The builders and sages of this vanished civilization are not merely teachers. They are custodians of memory, shepherds of civilization itself. Now imagine the fleeting nature of human attention. Civilizations rise, flourish, and fade, often forgetting the very lessons they were given. In that light, the paradox becomes even more poignant. These sages could have known the fragility of humanity, the impermanence of empires. Their work was not about immediate recognition or fame. It was about leaving clues, breadcrumbs, signs in stone and in the sky, so that even thousands of years later, the essence of their wisdom could be recovered. The disappearance of this civilization raises another question. Did they choose to vanish, or were they erased by forces beyond comprehension? Perhaps their disappearance was the ultimate safeguard. By retreating or being swept away by cataclysm, they removed themselves from the equation of immediate power struggles, leaving only the immutable record for future generations. Perhaps their genius was never in dominating the present, but in ensuring that the future could be informed, guided, and inspired. This paradox mirrors the fragile nature of human achievement today. Consider our cities, our technologies, our vast networks of information. They are sophisticated, yes, but almost entirely dependent on systems that can fail. One catastrophic event, climate collapse, geomagnetic storm, pandemic, or cosmic impact could render much of what we rely on meaningless. In this, the lessons of the Sea People sages are both inspiring and cautionary. They understood the limits of civilization and prepared for continuity in ways that we have only begun to grasp. And yet, even in their absence, the echoes persist. Every megalithic site is a point of contact between past and present, a reminder that ingenuity is not always visible, that civilization is more than monuments or armies. The precision of a polygonal wall, the alignment of a temple to the solstice, the careful placement of a terraced field, these are acts of communication across millennia. The paradox of their existence, then, is a lesson. The greatest achievements are not always those that dominate their era, but those that endure beyond it, beyond the fragile span of human memory. It is also humbling to consider their perspective on time. While we think in years and decades, they thought in cycles, in generations, in epochs. Their understanding of cosmic patterns, the motion of stars, the cycles of ice ages, the rhythms of agriculture, was married to a profound patience. They knew that knowledge must be embedded in forms that survive not just individual lifetimes, but the collective forgetfulness of civilization itself. Stone and star, shadow and alignment become their letters, their language of permanence. And in that language, they pose a silent question to us. If they could plan across millennia, if they could encode wisdom in forms resistant to cataclysm, what might we achieve if we adopted the same perspective? How would our own civilizations change if foresight and patience, consciousness and humility were our highest technologies? The paradox of their disappearance is also a challenge. To see beyond our immediate era and consider the legacy we leave, the knowledge we encode, the signals we send into a future we will never inhabit. Stand before one of these ancient stones today and feel the weight not only of the rock itself, but of time pressing upon it. The wind has carved its edges, rain has washed over its surface, yet it remains, a sentinel against the ephemeral nature of human achievement. What does this tell us about our own era, with its skyscrapers of glass, its global networks, its technologies capable of instantaneous communication across continents? Everything we build can crumble in an instant, but the stones endure. The lesson is simple, yet profound. Permanence is not in size, nor in speed, nor in volume. It is in foresight, precision, and the understanding of natural laws. Imagine a modern city struck by catastrophe, a flood, an earthquake, a sudden climate shift. Entire districts could vanish in hours. Knowledge stored on servers, on fragile paper, or in chemical archives could be lost forever. Yet the stones, placed with care thousands of years ago, remain. They speak across ages, teaching us that true legacy is structural, enduring, and often invisible to the casual observer. Each megalith is not merely a monument of the past. It is a message in a bottle, cast across the ocean of time, addressed to us, the inheritors of a fragile civilization. Consider how we measure progress. We celebrate technological advancement, industrial output, and digital innovation, often forgetting that these achievements are vulnerable. Contrast that with the deliberate, patient construction of these ancient works. The builders understood that knowledge, wisdom, and culture must be encoded in systems resistant to decay, disruption, and neglect. Their measures were not of convenience or immediacy. They were measures of survival. And in that survival lies the anchor to reality. The stones were made to outlast the cataclysm that erased their creators. Walking among the remains of Sacsayhuaman or the terraces of Ollantaytambo, one cannot help but notice the integration of human effort with the environment. Every wall is built to hug the contour of the land, every terrace to channel water efficiently, every stone to fit perfectly with its neighbors. There is an ecological intelligence encoded in every joint, every slope, every alignment. The modern world, in contrast, often works against nature-concrete rivers, diverted ecosystems, unsustainable agriculture. The ancients remind us that durability is inseparable from harmony with the planet. Our fragility is as much ethical and structural as it is material. The stones also challenge our sense of history as linear. We assume a steady progression, hunter-gatherers to villages to cities to empires. Yet the evidence suggests a more complex story. Knowledge can be gained, lost, and regained. Civilizations can rise and vanish with little trace. These megaliths are proof that human history is cyclical, that sophistication is not a guarantee of permanence, and that the past may be far richer than our textbooks admit. In this sense, the stones serve as both warning and inspiration. They warn of our vulnerability, and they inspire humility, creativity, and patience in planning for the future. Even in the absence of their creators, these structures continue to communicate. The alignment of a temple to a solstice, the angle of a carved stone, the precision of a polygonal wall, all are lessons in observation, mathematics, and patience. They are lessons that transcend language, politics, and culture. A child visiting the site, a scientist mapping the stones, a traveler pausing to touch the rock, all receive the same instruction. Understand the world not only as it is now, but as it moved through time. Modern civilizations could learn from this lesson. Our most advanced technologies, if unanchored by foresight, are temporary. Satellites orbiting Earth may fall silent. Digital archives may corrupt. Cities may flood. What survives will be what is resilient, what integrates with natural cycles, what respects the slow rhythms of geology, climate, and human cognition. The ancients encoded survival, not just in stone, but in patterns, rituals, and observation. Their legacy is a blueprint for endurance, one we ignore at our peril. And yet, there is hope in this continuity. While our skyscrapers and servers may fail, our ability to study, decode, and honor these ancient markers allows us to connect with wisdom lost to time. By tracing their alignments, measuring their geometry, and understanding their context, we are engaging in a dialogue with minds separated from ours by millennia. Every careful observation, every archaeological insight, is a conversation with the past, reminding us that intelligence, patience, and careful planning are as crucial today as they were 12,000 years ago. In this light, the stones are not relics, they are teachers. They ask us to consider the impermanence of power, the necessity of planning for generations, and the value of embedding knowledge in forms that outlast any individual or empire. They tell us, if you wish to endure, build with understanding, align with the cycles of nature, and respect the scales of time. The paradox of their silence is that it speaks more loudly than any written record. Permanence is not an accident. It is deliberate, conscious, and profound. Finally, as we step back from these monuments, one cannot help but reflect on our own place in the continuum of human civilization. We are temporary stewards of a fragile species, capable of brilliance yet prone to hubris. The stones remind us that civilization is not guaranteed, that knowledge can be wiped away in an instant, and that the act of building, whether in stone, in culture, or in thought, carries responsibility. To see a megalith is to see an echo of human ambition tempered by wisdom, a bridge between the before world and our own, and a silent plea to honor the cycles of time we inherit. From the first touch of stone in Peru to the silent rise of the T-pillars in Göbekli Tepe, our journey has traversed continents, epochs, and civilizations. Each step, each observation, has revealed a story not fully told by textbooks or recorded history. A story whispered in the weight of stone, the alignment of temples, and the precision of megalithic architecture. We began with the tactile sensation of colossal stones, imagining the hands that carved, lifted, and joined them with seemingly impossible precision. That was our first encounter with a civilization lost, yet still speaking across the ages. We moved then across time and space, tracing the echoes of a single hand in structures separated by thousands of miles and millennia. In Stonehenge, Newgrange, Chichen Itza, and Giza, the sky itself became a shared language, a celestial clock that bound disparate cultures to the same cosmic rhythm. The solstices, equinoxes, and the rising of Orion or the Pleiades became not mere curiosities, but deliberate markers of knowledge, observation, and ritual. We saw the same signature repeated in stone and sky, suggesting either extraordinary coincidence or a shared inheritance from a civilization whose memory survives only in stone and myth. Our exploration of construction techniques, the polygonal walls, precision-cut granite, and the massive H-blocks of Puma Punku reminded us that human ingenuity can reach heights still challenging for our modern imagination. Techniques lost to history, perhaps deliberately encoded, hint at a sophistication not measured merely in technology, but in understanding, planning, and long-term vision. These builders were architects of endurance, embedding knowledge where fire, flood, or neglect could not reach it. Then came the anchor of reality, the Younger Dryas Cataclysm. A comet or some other sudden celestial event plunged the world into an abrupt ice age. Species vanished, landscapes transformed, and human societies, possibly advanced beyond what we usually credit to prehistory, were shattered. We imagined the survivors, carrying fragments of knowledge, wandering a transformed planet, becoming the culture bearers who would inspire myths, legends, and the foundations of later civilizations. It was here that geology, astronomy, and archaeology converged, revealing the plausible mechanics for a lost global civilization. The myths of a great flood, repeated across continents and cultures, deepened this connection. Gilgamesh's deluge, Viracocha in the Andes, Quetzalcoatl in Mesoamerica. These are not just stories. They are encoded memories of upheaval, survival, and the transmission of knowledge. They suggest that humanity's collective memory has retained fragments of the same events, that the celestial and terrestrial alignments, the monumental architecture, and the oral traditions form an interwoven record, waiting for us to read it. Our journey also examined the imaginative reconstruction of those who survived. The Sea People Sages, a network of maritime architects who saw the world as a unified system, building not for empire or conquest, but as custodians of knowledge. They left time capsules in stone, markers designed to survive the cataclysmic cycles of Earth, guiding future generations. This vision, while speculative, offers a bridge between what we observe and what we might dare to believe. a civilization of extraordinary foresight, whose fingerprints are visible in the monuments scattered across continents. And finally, we drew the connection to our present. These megaliths are not just echoes of the past. They are warnings, lessons, and reminders. They teach us about fragility, resilience, and the responsibility that comes with building, whether in stone, in culture, or in knowledge. They ask us to consider the impermanence of power, the cycles of civilization, and the necessity of embedding wisdom in forms that endure. Standing before these stones, we see more than architecture. We see questions written across millennia, questions about human potential, about survival, about the choices that shape civilizations. The stones themselves are a silent orchestra, performing a melody of observation, understanding, and continuity. They urge us to listen carefully, to consider our place in the ongoing flow of time, and to recognize that the story of humanity is far older, richer, and more interconnected than we often imagine. In tracing this path, we have moved from the tangible, the feel of stones beneath our fingertips, to the cosmic, the alignment of monuments with stars, and the vast sweep of history. We have imagined lost civilizations, catastrophic events, and the resilient human spirit. And through all of it, one constant emerges: the signatures of a civilization that understood the importance of embedding knowledge and permanence, a civilization whose echoes still resonate, waiting for us to hear. As we pause here, on the threshold of reflection, we are reminded that the journey is not only about the past. It is about understanding how the ancient informs the present, how patterns in stone and sky can guide our thinking, and how we might approach the future with the humility, foresight, and respect that these ancients encoded in every monument, every alignment, every carved surface. The megaliths are more than monuments. They are monuments to time itself. Each stone, each alignment, each precisely carved surface is a message that has survived thousands of years, outlasting empires, languages, and even climate itself. To stand before them is to confront the immensity of history and the fragility of human memory. These structures are deliberate, patient, and eternal, asking questions that no single person or culture could fully answer. Consider for a moment the scale of what we have observed. From the T-pillars of Göbekli Tepe to the Cyclopean walls of Sacsayhuaman, from the serpent shadow of Chichen Itza to the winter solstice light at Newgrange, a pattern emerges. It is a pattern not of conquest or decoration, but of purpose and preservation. The ancients were not building merely for their own moment. They were building for a future they could not inhabit, for civilizations that would come long after their names were forgotten. The stones speak across time, asking us to look, to wonder, to remember. And what is the nature of this wonder? It is not simple curiosity. It is an acknowledgement of our smallness, our fleeting lives against the backdrop of millennia. These structures remind us that the human spirit, when aligned with purpose and knowledge, can reach extraordinary heights. But they also caution us. Civilizations rise and fall. Knowledge can be lost, and what we take for granted today may be as mysterious to the future as these stones are to us now. Perhaps the greatest gift of these megaliths is not their physical presence, nor the astronomical precision, nor even the architectural genius, but the questions they embed. They challenge us to consider the possibility of a shared human inheritance, a common thread of knowledge and understanding that transcended continents and millennia. They invite us to imagine a civilization that valued wisdom over conquest, understanding over vanity, foresight over immediacy. In this reflection, we are forced to confront our own amnesia as a species. How much have we forgotten about our origins? How many insights, discoveries, and lessons have been buried beneath the rubble of time? The stones, in their quiet endurance, are reminders that human knowledge is fragile yet resilient, fleeting yet eternal. They are breadcrumbs left behind by those who came before, markers for those who will follow. And so, the megaliths ask not for answers, but for contemplation. They ask us to observe carefully, to read the world with patience, and to honor the cycles of nature and time. In doing so, we find ourselves connected, not just to the builders who carved these stones, but to the broader arc of human history, to the cosmos that has guided our ancestors, and to the generations yet to come. As we stand at the intersection of history, myth, and archaeology, we begin to sense the unity underlying human experience. The stones, the stars, the myths, they are not isolated phenomena, but expressions of a coherent worldview, a deep-seated understanding of the universe and our place within it. They teach us that knowledge is most enduring when it is encoded in form and function, in ritual and story, in architecture and alignment. Ultimately, the megaliths are a meditation on time, on memory, and on the human condition. They remind us that we are both fleeting and enduring, fragile and resilient. They call us to look beyond the immediacy of our lives, to consider the long arc of history, and to respect the lessons written in stone by hands long gone. In their silence, they speak volumes about human ambition, about cosmic cycles, about the impermanence of empires, and about the enduring nature of knowledge when carefully preserved. The mystery remains unsolved, but that is precisely their gift. They offer not finality, but invitation to wonder, to explore, and to participate in a dialogue that spans thousands of years. They urge us to question, to observe, and to imagine. In doing so, we honor not only the ancients who built them, but the very essence of human curiosity and resilience that persists in each of us. And so, we are left with a choice: to walk past these stones obliviously, or to pause, to reflect, to let their presence inform our understanding of time, of civilization, and of ourselves. To truly see them is to connect with a continuum of thought, skill, and vision that stretches across ages. The stones are the questions. We are the ones who must seek the answers, however incomplete they may be. We are a species with amnesia, wandering through the echoes of a past we can only partially remember. The megaliths are the breadcrumbs left by those who came before, faint signals across time that remind us of our place within a grander story. When we trace the contours of a stone wall, when we observe the alignment of a temple to a star, we are not merely studying architecture or astronomy. We are participating in an ancient conversation, one that began long before our birth and will continue long after we are gone. The builders of these monuments were deeply aware of the cycles of the earth and the heavens, of the rhythms of seasons, floods, and celestial movements. They encoded this knowledge in forms designed to endure, in ways that would communicate across generations. And now, standing millennia later, we are the inheritors of that message. Yet, so often, we overlook it. We pass by the stones, glance at the carvings, measure the shadows without fully listening to the story being told. There is a lesson here about memory, human, cultural, and collective. Civilizations rise and fall. Knowledge is lost, myths transform, and yet certain truths persist. Perhaps the wisdom of the ancients was not meant to be fully understood in its own time, but to ripple outward, touching future generations in fragments, glimpses, and hints. The megaliths are a form of resilience, a testament to what humans can leave behind when they think in terms of centuries, not years, millennia, not decades. And in reflecting on this, we confront our own fragility. Modern life, for all its technology and complexity, is fleeting when measured against the vast arc of history. Our cities, our achievements, our entire civilizations could vanish, leaving only traces, artifacts, ruins, stories, and perhaps stones aligned to the stars. The ancients remind us that the measure of endurance is not in immediate utility, but in the foresight to create something that can survive time, catastrophe, and forgetfulness. Yet there is hope in this awareness. By observing and contemplating the megaliths, we reconnect with a fundamental human impulse: to understand, to communicate, and to preserve. We see that the need to leave a mark, to guide those who follow, and to encode wisdom into enduring forms is universal. It transcends culture, geography, and even the limits of time. These structures are a mirror reflecting our own desire for continuity and significance. The connection to the human condition becomes even more profound when we consider that these builders faced challenges we can scarcely imagine: harsh climates, limited technology, and cataclysmic events. And yet they persisted, leaving messages that survive when so many other traces of their lives have vanished. Their legacy is a challenge to us. Will we recognize the patterns? Will we preserve what is vital? Will we ensure that our own knowledge endures for generations to come? We also confront mortality through these stones. We are reminded that life is transient and that individual achievements may fade, but collective memory and cultural intent can endure far longer. Each megalith is a bridge between the fleeting human moment and the vast expanse of geological and cosmic time. In standing before them, we experience humility, awe, and connection. We see ourselves as part of an unbroken line of inquiry, curiosity, and wonder stretching across the ages. In a deeper sense, the megaliths teach us empathy for our ancestors and responsibility toward the future. They suggest that human intelligence and ingenuity are not limited by technology alone, but by vision, intent, and care. The builders understood that they were not the only witnesses to existence. They acted in service of knowledge for the benefit of those who would come after. And so, we are called to act with similar foresight, to preserve, to honor, to contribute thoughtfully to the continuum of human experience. And in this understanding, we recognize that the stones are not silent. Their message is encoded in scale, orientation, and placement. They speak of harmony between human effort and natural law, of reverence for the cycles of the earth and the cosmos. They whisper of patience, precision, and purpose that transcends individual lifespan. To listen is to enter a dialogue with all of humanity's past and all of its potential future. The megaliths are also a mirror to our curiosity and imagination. They remind us that mystery is a crucial component of human growth, that the questions they pose are as important as any answers we may find. In attempting to understand their construction, their purpose, and their creators, we cultivate wonder, creativity, and a sense of connection to something larger than ourselves. In this way, the stones continue to educate, inspire, and challenge. Ultimately, the connection to the human condition is a meditation on continuity, memory, and the endurance of knowledge. The builders of these ancient monuments are silent teachers, and we are students across millennia. We are reminded that civilization is not merely the accumulation of facts or artifacts, but the careful transmission of wisdom, the encoding of understanding in forms that survive even the most catastrophic upheavals. As we stand in their shadow, we are invited to reflect on our own actions, our own contributions, and the legacy we hope to leave. We are reminded that even small gestures, thoughtfully considered and intentionally executed, can echo through time. We are urged to listen, to learn, and to participate in the timeless human endeavor of preserving knowledge, meaning, and wonder. And in the quiet presence of these stones, we realize that history is not just a record of what has been, but a living dialogue with what is to come. By understanding the megaliths, we reconnect with our shared humanity, with our collective curiosity, and with the eternal rhythm of time itself. In that connection, we find both humility and hope, a recognition of our place in the grand arc of existence, and an invitation to honor, continue, and expand the legacy we inherit. Let the weight of these stones settle around you. Feel it not as heaviness, but as the gravity of countless ages pressing gently into the present moment. Each block, each carefully carved surface, each alignment to a star or solstice carries not only the intent of its builder, but the echoes of the centuries that followed. The stone remembers. The earth remembers. And now, for a brief moment, you remember alongside them. Close your eyes if you wish, and imagine the hands that shaped these monuments. not as abstract figures in textbooks, but as living beings, craftsmen and dreamers, architects of a vision that spanned oceans and generations. Hear the faint clink of tools, the subtle shift of massive stones, the low hum of communal work, synchronized with the rhythm of day and night. These echoes have traveled across time, and you can still sense their pulse if you quiet your mind. Breathe slowly, in and out, and let each exhale carry away the noise of the modern world. The traffic, the screens, the ceaseless chatter all fade as you focus on the slow, deliberate creation of monuments that have outlasted empires, languages, and even the memory of the builders themselves. The stones were never meant to be conquered by time. They were meant to converse with it. And now, in this quiet, you can listen. Imagine standing atop a platform in Sacsayhuaman. Feel the wind across the massive walls, the contours of each stone beneath your fingertips, and the impossible precision of their placement. The builders sought more than permanence. They sought continuity. Their knowledge, their ritual, their reverence for the cosmos was embedded in every seam, every angle, every orientation. This was not construction for the present. It was instruction for the future, a guidepost for generations yet unborn. Let your mind travel to Göbekli Tepe, where T-shaped pillars rise like silent sentinels beneath the vast Anatolian sky. Picture the carvings of animals, the spirals and symbols whose meanings are partially lost, yet whose presence communicates a sophisticated understanding of order, pattern, and narrative. Here, as in Peru, the sky is the canvas and the stones are the brushstrokes. Light and shadow dance as they did thousands of years ago, revealing subtle shifts that mark the cycles of sun, moon, and stars. You are a witness to this choreography across time. Now shift your awareness to the soundscape of this imagined world. The crash of ocean waves for the sea people sages, the rustle of reeds and grass in plains long vanished, the whisper of wind through deserts where no city remains. These are the voices of a civilization encoded in place, sound, and silence. The earth itself carries the memory, and in attuning yourself, you participate in a dialogue older than any writing. Consider the fleeting nature of human life against this backdrop. We live brief moments in comparison to these monumental efforts. Yet here, in our imagination, we are granted the patience and perspective of the builders. Their intentions stretch beyond individual lifespans, beyond the span of empires, beyond even the limits of recorded history. And in their persistence, we find guidance. That the measure of significance is not immediate fame, but enduring impact, the wisdom that transcends mortality. Feel the resonance of time, like a slow river flowing beneath your feet. Each stone is a ripple, each alignment a current, and you are floating gently in their stream. The cycle of seasons, of celestial motion, of human endeavor and collapse, all converge here. The stones speak in silence, the stars speak in light, and together they form a language of continuity, urging patience, observation, and humility. As your awareness deepens, sense the interconnectedness of all things. From the distant mountains of Peru to the plains of Mesopotamia, from the deserts of Egypt to the highlands of Anatolia, the fingerprints of this lost civilization appear like constellations across the earth. Their wisdom is embedded not in a single artifact or text, but in the alignment of knowledge with nature, in the careful translation of observation into enduring form. You are part of that web now, a conscious participant in a story that has already lasted millennia. Let the sensation of awe settle in. Not fear, not confusion, not the need to solve every mystery, simply awe. The builder's questions echo across time. What is enduring? What is worth preserving? How can we speak to the future with clarity, compassion, and creativity? These questions remain unanswered, and yet that is their power. They invite reflection, meditation, and a profound sense of continuity that is greater than any single life. Breathe once more, slowly, and feel the flow of history, of knowledge, and of human aspiration passing through you. The stones are immovable, yet they move us. The sky is eternal, yet it instructs us. In this convergence, you find a rare stillness, a grounding that exists beyond the noise of modernity. You are, for a moment, aligned with the rhythm of the earth and the cosmos, participating in the preservation of memory across ages. And as this meditation deepens, let the boundary between past and present dissolve. The builders are not distant. They are here, in the careful angles of stones, in the interplay of light and shadow, in the enduring message of observation and creation. They were aware that everything is ephemeral, yet sought permanence where it mattered most, in the instruction, the ritual, and the connection to the cycles of the world. You, too, are part of that continuum, both witness and inheritor. In this quiet reflection, let the lessons of the megaliths permeate your consciousness. That human endeavor can reach across time, that knowledge can survive catastrophe, and that the desire to communicate across generations is a defining trait of our species. The stones are patient teachers, offering insights not in haste, but in the slow, deliberate cadence of centuries. Feel the calm that comes with understanding this larger perspective. Time stretches, human lives blend into the flow, and the earth continues its rotation, indifferent yet accommodating, eternal yet receptive. You are part of that rhythm now, breathing with it, listening to it, honoring it. And finally, as your awareness begins to draw inward, like the silence of the ancient builders, become your own. Do not seek to solve their mysteries today. Do not demand answers or conclusions. Instead, feel the weight of time, the gravity of intention, and the subtle power of enduring knowledge. In that feeling lies the purpose of the megaliths, and in that feeling, you are both student and guardian of their legacy. This was another story in the endless river of time. A journey across continents, across millennia, across the very cycles of the earth and sky. From the colossal stones of Sacsayhuaman to the silent T-pillars of Göbekli Tepe, from sunlit chambers in Newgrange to the shadowed terraces of Chichen Itza, you have traveled with the hands and minds of a lost civilization whose echoes still resonate in stone and sky. Take a moment to feel that resonance. The earth beneath your feet, the wind brushing your skin, the faint warmth of sunlight, or the cool of a shadowed stone, these are not mere sensations. They are the whispers of builders long gone, of a knowledge encoded to endure, of an intention that has outlasted empires and languages. They left behind not monuments for fame, but monuments for memory, teaching us patience, awe, and the humility of our place in the universe. As you absorb this, let the continuity of time sink deeper into your awareness. You are not separate from the past, nor solely a product of the present. You are part of the flow of consciousness that stretches from the hands of those ancient architects to your own. Each breath, each heartbeat, aligns with a rhythm that has endured for thousands of years. You are a witness to history, yes, but also a custodian. What you carry forward, even in quiet reflection, is part of the chain that links generations across time. Now, allow your mind to drift gently back toward yourself. You have wandered across continents and civilizations, yet you are here, grounded in your own moment. Feel the lessons of the megaliths not as abstract knowledge, but as a tangible sense of presence. The stones were built to endure, and you, in understanding them, endure as well, through memory, through awareness, and through the stories you carry onward. If your imagination has wandered among these ancient architects, if you have traced the alignments of the stars and felt the weight of colossal stones, then you have participated in a subtle act of communion across time. You have joined a dialogue that began long before the written word, that traveled oceans and deserts, that survived cataclysm and cultural collapse. And in that communion, you have become a part of something far larger than yourself, a story written in stone, in sky, and in the quiet continuity of human aspiration. So, as we gently close this chapter, let the journey linger in your consciousness. Let the weight of the stones, the vastness of the skies, and the careful observation of ancient sages become a quiet companion in your thoughts. Let them inspire patience, curiosity, and reverence for the knowledge that endures beyond lifetimes. And when you are ready to rest, take one last deep breath. Feel the flow of time around you, the endless river carrying you forward, while simultaneously linking you backward to every hand that shaped, every mind that observed, every story that survived. Let the echo of that lost civilization be a gentle reminder that history is cyclical, that knowledge can survive catastrophe, and that the human spirit has always sought to understand, preserve, and communicate across generations. Good night, dreamer of ages. Let this story carry you into sleep, into contemplation, into reverie. Let your mind wander freely among ancient stones, sunlit chambers, and starlit skies. And remember, the journey is never truly over. There are always more echoes to hear, more alignments to trace, more questions to feel. If this exploration has resonated with you, consider joining our community. Subscribe to continue these journeys across time, across civilizations, and across the mysteries that connect us all. Let us wander together, thoughtfully, curiously, and reverently, tracing the fingerprints of a civilization that may have been lost, but whose message endures for anyone willing to pause, to feel, and to wonder. The stones are patient. The sky is constant. And now, so are you, briefly aligned with both. Let them guide you, let them teach you, and let them carry you gently into the infinite river of time.